The moving truck hadn't even cooled its engine when the first shot of trouble came flying at us in the form of a high-pitched, demanding voice that made the entire street pause. Emily, my wife, had barely lifted the first box out of the back when she froze mid-step, balancing it against her hip. I turned toward the source of the sound, and there she was, a woman in her mid-50s, hair pinned so tightly it looked like it hurt, sunglasses oversized enough to cover half her face, and an expression carved in permanent disapproval. She was marching toward us like a general onto a battlefield, her heels clicking hard against the pavement. "Excuse me," she screeched. "You can't unload here. This neighborhood has rules." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my face calm. Emily, bless her heart, tried to smooth things over. She smiled and nodded politely, shifting the box toward the porch, but Karen, the name fit her instantly, wasn't satisfied. She quickened her pace, pointing with a clipboard she had tucked under her arm. "Stop right there. You can't move in without approval. You can't just show up and drop things off like this. It's against the regulations." Emily glanced at me, a silent plea in her eyes. "Please handle this before I lose my patience." I sighed and stepped forward. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. This property isn't under your HOA. We purchased it directly from the previous owner. Everything is signed, sealed, and recorded. You don't have jurisdiction here." She gasped as if I'd insulted her entire lineage. Her lips pursed so tightly they almost vanished, and her shoulders squared. "Don't try to pull one over on me," she snapped. "I know every single person who belongs here, and you two aren't them. Everyone here answers to me. You're not moving another box until I see a permit with my stamp on it." A laugh almost escaped me, but I caught it. Emily adjusted the box and muttered under her breath, "You've got to be kidding me." But Karen was dead serious. She stormed closer, heels stabbing the ground like she was trying to puncture it. "If you think you're going to live here without my approval, think again. This is my neighborhood. I enforce the rules. And you," she pointed her clipboard like a sword, "are trespassing." I raised my hands in a calming gesture. "Look, I don't want to start off on the wrong foot. But we legally own this house. You don't get a vote. So please, let us do our thing and move in peacefully." For a split second, I thought maybe she'd relent. But her face twisted into something uglier, fueled by the fact that we hadn't bowed down to her authority. She whipped out her phone so fast it startled Emily, who nearly dropped the box. Karen jabbed the screen with her finger, pacing like she was reporting a terrorist attack. "Yes, officer. I need immediate assistance," she announced loudly, making sure the entire street could hear. "We've got 2 trespassers unloading stolen goods into a vacant property. They're dangerous, and I feel threatened. Please send someone right away." Emily's mouth fell open. "Stolen goods? Is she serious?" I shook my head slowly. She's about to dig herself into a hole she won't be able to climb out of. Karen spun back toward us, triumphant. "The police are on their way. I hope you've enjoyed your little scam, because when they get here, it's over. You're going to jail." She folded her arms, smug as if she'd already won. The neighbors across the street peeked through their blinds. A couple down the block had even stepped onto their porch, whispering to each other as though a crime scene was unfolding. I could feel the weight of all those eyes on us, judging, curious, entertained. Emily set the box on the porch and crossed her arms. "So this is how it's going to be. Every box we carry, she's going to threaten us." I kept my eyes on Karen. Let her dig. Once the cops see the deed, this all ends. Karen smirked. "Oh, you think so? I've been here 20 years. The police know me. They listen to me. You two don't stand a chance. People like you don't belong in communities like this." That last sentence hit differently. Emily stiffened, her jaw tightening. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough so Karen had to lean in to hear. You've just made 2 mistakes. 1, you called the cops on the new legal owners of this home. 2, you just revealed what you really think of people like us. Neither of those is going to work out well for you. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned sharply, pacing near the curb, rehearsing her victim act for when the police arrived. Emily exhaled, frustrated, and shook her head. We were supposed to start our life here in peace. This was supposed to be simple. Just us, the lake, and a little quiet. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry. This is just noise. Once the truth comes out, she'll have no power left. But inside, I felt something stirring. A tension I hadn't wanted to feel again. A part of me I'd worked so hard to leave behind. I told myself to stay calm, to keep things quiet. But when Karen said the police would listen to her because they knew her, something told me this day was going to take a turn I hadn't expected. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, the distant sound of a siren began echoing closer, bouncing off the quiet lakefront homes. Karen perked up like a cat hearing a can opener. She stood tall, ready to play her part, while Emily muttered, "Here we go." I whispered back, "Let's just stay calm. Once this is over, she'll regret dialing that number." But I had no idea then just how strange the encounter was about to get, or how quickly my past was about to come crashing into our present, carried on the lips of a police officer who would recognize me with a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. The siren grew louder as the patrol car rounded the corner, red and blue lights bouncing off every window on the street. Karen waved both arms in the air like she was directing an emergency landing at an airport, yelling, "Over here, officer. Right here," as though she'd personally captured the most wanted criminals in the state. Neighbors crept out onto porches, whispering to one another, their curiosity feeding Karen's already inflated ego. Emily leaned toward me and whispered, "She looks like she's auditioning for a crime drama." I smirked, keeping my arms crossed, calm but ready. The officer stepped out of the car slowly, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that scanned the scene before resting on us. His hand hovered near his belt, not threatening but alert. Karen nearly pounced on him. "Thank goodness you're here. I've caught them red-handed. They were unloading stolen goods into this property. They don't live here, they don't belong here, and they've been trespassing for the last 30 minutes. Arrest them immediately." She pointed at us as if she'd just delivered the winning shot in a courtroom drama. The officer raised a hand, silencing her theatrics. His tone was calm but firm. "Ma'am, please step back. I'll handle this." Karen looked offended that he didn't instantly slap handcuffs on us, but she obeyed, folding her arms and tapping her foot. The officer turned to me and Emily. "Afternoon. Mind telling me what's going on here?" Emily, still holding a box labeled books, gave him a tired smile. "We just moved in. That's all. We're carrying boxes, and she decided that's a crime." I added, "This house belongs to us. We purchased it legally. She's mistaken." Karen butted in, "Mistaken? Don't believe a word they say. That paper they'll show you is fake. Everyone here knows me. I run this neighborhood." The officer raised a brow. "Ma'am," I said, "step back." Then he looked at me. "Do you have documentation to prove ownership?" I nodded and pulled the deed papers from my pocket, handing them over without hesitation. He unfolded them carefully, his eyes scanning line by line, checking names and signatures. The silence was heavy, every neighbor leaning forward to see which side the officer would land on. Finally, he folded the papers back up and handed them to me. "These look valid." Karen gasped, shaking her head violently. "No, no, no. They can't be valid. He probably printed those at home. Look at them, suspicious from the start. Who moves in without notifying me first? Emily nearly laughed but restrained herself, whispering, "Not everything revolves around you, lady." The officer turned back to us, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "Sorry for the inconvenience. I'll get this cleared up." He was about to continue when his eyes lingered on me longer than necessary. His expression shifted, confusion first, then recognition, and then disbelief. He tilted his head slightly, studying my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He took a cautious step closer. His voice dropped low, almost like he didn't want Karen or the crowd to hear. "Wait a second," his tone carried a weight I recognized instantly. "Is that Ghost Viper?" My breath caught for just a moment, though I kept my face neutral. It had been years since anyone had said that name to me. Emily froze, her eyes darting toward mine, silently asking what he meant. Karen scrunched up her face. "Ghost what? What nonsense is this? He's a trespasser, not some cartoon character." The officer ignored her completely, his attention locked on me. "Sir," he whispered, barely moving his lips, "you are Ghost Viper, aren't you? Special operations, classified missions overseas, the one who—" I cut him off quickly, shaking my head almost imperceptibly, my voice calm but firm. "Not here. Not now." His eyes widened, but instead of pressing, he straightened and gave me the faintest respectful nod, a glimmer of awe still etched on his face. Karen stomped her foot, furious at being sidelined. "What are you whispering about? He's a criminal. Do your job, officer." He turned to her, his demeanor shifting instantly from respect to strict authority. "Ma'am, you've just made a false 911 report. That's a crime. These people legally own this property. You have no grounds to harass them." She sputtered like an engine refusing to start. "No. That's not true. You can't take their side. I'm the HOA president. I decide who belongs here. If you let them stay, this whole community will fall apart." The officer's patience thinned. "You don't decide anything outside of your HOA jurisdiction, and this property isn't under it. I've checked the boundaries before. This is private property, and they are the rightful owners. If you keep interfering, I'll have no choice but to charge you with harassment and filing a false report." The neighbors watching from across the street murmured, surprised. Some even laughed quietly, shaking their heads at Karen's meltdown. Her power was crumbling right in front of them. Emily leaned closer to me, whispering, "What did he call you? Ghost something?" I gave her a quick look, silently asking her to drop it for now. She raised a brow but didn't push. Karen, meanwhile, was fuming, red-faced and desperate. "I don't care what papers you saw. Nobody moves in without my approval. Nobody. This is my neighborhood, and you'll regret crossing me." The officer's voice sharpened. "Ma'am, I've warned you. This ends now." He placed one hand on his radio, clearly ready to escalate if she didn't stop. That shut her up for the moment, though the fury in her eyes told me she wasn't done. She turned and stormed back toward her yard, muttering under her breath, probably already scheming her next move. The officer took a deep breath, then turned back to us. His eyes softened again, and in a voice only I could hear, he said, "It really is you, isn't it? Ghost Viper. I read the reports, the debriefs. You disappeared after that last mission. Everyone thought you'd either retired into silence or didn't make it back. Sir, it's an honor." I clenched my jaw slightly, keeping my tone even. "That life is behind me. This is just my home now. I'd appreciate it if you kept it that way." He nodded firmly, respect shining in his eyes. "Of course. Your secret's safe with me." Emily was still giving me side glances, trying to piece things together, but she stayed quiet for now. The officer adjusted his hat, glanced back at Karen's house, and said more loudly, I'll file a report about the false call. If she bothers you again, let me know. We'll handle it. Thank you, I said simply. He gave one last knowing look, then walked back to his patrol car. The lights shut off, the siren silenced, and the car rolled slowly down the street, leaving Karen fuming in her yard and the neighbors buzzing with speculation. Emily crossed her arms, turning to me the moment he was gone. Okay, she said flatly, what on earth is Ghost Viper? I exhaled, watching Karen's curtains twitch as she spied on us from inside her house. That, I said quietly, is a name I hoped I'd never hear again. By the time I pulled into the gas station, the scene already looked like something out of a reality show. 2 police cars were parked near the pumps, lights flashing but sirens off, and a small crowd of curious onlookers had gathered to watch. My wife stood calmly next to our truck, arms folded, holding the little piece of paper that was about to change everything, the printed receipt. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing back and forth like a prosecutor about to deliver the trial of the century. She pointed at my wife, then at the pump, then at the officers, her voice raised high enough that everyone in the area could hear her accusations. That's her. That's the thief I told you about. She's using fake cards, stealing gas, and now she's waving around a phony receipt. The officers, both young but professional looking, tried to keep straight faces as they listened, but even from my car I could see them struggling not to roll their eyes. I walked over quickly, not to escalate but to support my wife. She gave me a relieved smile when she saw me, but I could tell she was still frustrated by the whole ordeal. One of the officers turned to her politely and asked, "Ma'am, can we see proof of purchase?" Without hesitation, my wife handed him the printed receipt. He glanced down at it, scanned the numbers, checked the time stamp, and then looked back up at her with an expression that was almost comical, because in that moment, the absurdity of what he was dealing with hit him full force. He stifled a laugh, then showed the receipt to his partner. The second officer glanced at it, then burst out laughing so hard he had to take a step back. The crowd nearby chuckled too, clearly catching on that Karen had made herself look like a complete fool. Karen, however, wasn't about to give up her fantasy. She marched over, arms flailing, and shrieked, "Don't you dare fall for that. That receipt is fake. I've seen people on YouTube print those at home. Criminals do it all the time. She's lying." The first officer raised an eyebrow and said calmly, "Ma'am, this receipt was generated directly from this pump, and it matches the transaction log. It's valid." But Karen wouldn't hear it. "No, no, no. You don't understand, this is HOA property. This whole gas station is under our jurisdiction. She can't just come here and steal from us." The officer blinked at her in confusion, then said bluntly, "This is a Shell station, ma'am. It's not HOA property. It's public. Anyone can buy gas here." The people around started laughing openly now. A teenager holding his phone whispered loudly to his friend, "She thinks she owns the gas station." Another man yelled, "Lady, it's not your pump." But Karen was so wrapped up in her own version of reality that she ignored them all. She jabbed her finger at my wife and declared, "I don't care what you say, she's guilty. Arrest her." That's when one of the officers finally lost his composure. He actually chuckled and said, "Ma'am, we don't arrest people for buying gas legally." His partner, still holding the receipt, added, "If anything, you're the one causing a disturbance here. Filing a false 911 call is serious business." The word seemed to finally hit Karen, but instead of backing down, she got louder. "You think I'm afraid of you? I'm the HOA president. I know the law. I don't have to show you anything." She crossed her arms defiantly, acting like she had real power. The first officer sighed and said, "Actually, you do need to show ID. You called in an emergency that turned out to be false. That's misuse of 911, and we need your information for the report." Karen froze for a moment, caught off guard. She glanced at the crowd, suddenly realizing she wasn't the hero she thought she was. People weren't applauding her bravery, they were laughing at her. Phones were still recording, capturing every second of her meltdown. My wife, meanwhile, leaned against the truck with the calmness of someone who knew the truth was on her side, holding back a smirk as Karen's perfect little plan unraveled. Karen tried to pivot, lowering her voice and muttering, "I was just trying to protect our community. I thought she was stealing. I was doing my duty." But the officer wasn't buying it. He held up the receipt and said, "Your community has nothing to do with this. This receipt proves she paid. You wasted our time." Karen's face turned beet red. She tried again, weaker this time, "Well, maybe the receipt is real, but I had no way of knowing that. I had to act." The second officer tilted his head and said, "So your first instinct was to accuse her of theft and call 911? Not ask her? Not check with the station? Just call in a crime that didn't happen?" By now, even the gas station clerk had come outside, standing near the door with his arms folded, watching the mess play out. He shouted across the lot, "She paid. I can see it on my screen in here. Transaction cleared. Stop bothering my customers." That only fueled the crowd's laughter even more. Karen turned around and saw dozens of eyes on her, phones recording from every angle. Her swagger had completely deflated, but she still tried to salvage some dignity. "Fine," she huffed. "But next time, don't say I didn't warn you when people start stealing gas from our community." The officers exchanged looks that said everything. They were dealing with someone completely detached from reality. One of them told her firmly, "This is your final warning. If you ever call 911 for something this petty again, you'll be charged for filing a false report. Do you understand?" Karen muttered something under her breath but nodded. She was boxed in. The hero act had blown up in her face, and the more she argued, the worse it got for her. I stood next to my wife, squeezing her shoulder, proud of how she'd handled the whole thing without losing her cool. She handed the officer her ID just to show cooperation, and he chuckled as he handed it back, saying, "Honestly, we should frame this receipt. It's the funniest evidence we've seen in weeks." The tension eased, the crowd laughed again, and Karen finally realized she had lost. She stomped back to her car, slammed the door, and sped out of the lot, tires screeching. As the flashing lights from the squad cars reflected off the pavement, one of the officers turned to us and said with a smile, "Well, you two enjoy the rest of your evening. Sorry for the trouble. I think your neighbor just earned herself a new reputation." And he was right. From that moment on, everyone in town who saw that video, everyone who had been there at the station, would remember Karen not as the powerful HOA president she pretended to be, but as the woman who tried to call the cops on a gas receipt and ended up the punchline of her own story. The officers, now done laughing at the absurdity of the whole situation, turned their attention back to Karen, who was still fuming but clearly rattled by how quickly the crowd had turned against her. One of the cops took a step closer and said in a firm, no-nonsense tone, "Ma'am, you need to understand the seriousness of what you just did. Calling 911 for something that isn't a crime isn't just wasting our time, it's dangerous. While we were out here responding to this, someone else in real danger might not have gotten help as quickly." Karen tried to hold her ground, but her voice cracked when she answered, "I was protecting my neighborhood. I thought she was stealing, and if I didn't step in, who would? That's my responsibility as HOA president." The officer shook his head and replied, "No, your responsibility as a citizen is to use 911 only for real emergencies, not your personal grudges. You're not law enforcement, and you don't own this gas station. This has nothing to do with your HOA." The crowd was still hanging around, watching with amusement, phones raised to capture every word. A couple of people even started chanting softly, "Show your ID, show your ID," like they were egging on a boxing match. My wife and I didn't even have to say a word, we just stood there, letting Karen dig her own hole deeper and deeper. She puffed up again, trying to salvage some of her dignity, and barked, "I don't have to show you anything. I know my rights. I know the law." That made the second officer chuckle under his breath, and he said, "Actually, you're wrong. When you call 911, you create a report. That means we need your identification to document what happened. If you refuse, you're obstructing us." Karen's confidence wavered. For the first time, I could see her hesitation, the crack in her armor. She glanced around at the people recording her, clearly aware that every second of her stubbornness was being preserved forever on someone's phone. She started to panic, realizing that if she refused to cooperate, she might actually be cuffed and taken away. She stammered, "Well, I didn't mean for it to go this far." The first officer crossed his arms and said, "It already has. We're giving you a chance to do the right thing. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Finally, with shaking hands, Karen dug into her oversized purse, pulled out her wallet, and slapped her ID into the officer's hand with a huff. "There. Happy now?" The officer glanced at it, wrote down her information, and handed it back. He didn't even hide his smirk as he said, "Yes, thank you, Mrs. HOA President." The crowd snickered, and Karen's face turned bright red. My wife leaned close to me and whispered, "She's never living this down," and I couldn't help but agree. But Karen still wasn't finished embarrassing herself. After a few moments of silence, she suddenly pointed at me and barked, "And who's he? Why is he even here? He wasn't at the pump. Maybe he's part of the scam too." The officer looked at her like she had just sprouted two heads. "He's her husband," he said flatly. "And he hasn't done anything wrong. You're just making this worse for yourself." The crowd burst into laughter again, someone even shouting, "Karen, give it up already." But Karen just couldn't stop. She started rambling about how our family was always causing trouble in the neighborhood, how she'd seen us breaking HOA rules, and challenging her authority. She was throwing everything she had at the wall, desperate to justify her behavior. That's when the officer raised his hand to stop her. "Ma'am, none of that has anything to do with this. We're not here to enforce HOA rules. We're here because you claimed a crime was happening. We investigated, and it wasn't. End of story." He paused for a moment, then added, "If you keep making accusations without evidence, you're the one who's going to end up in legal trouble, not them." His words hit like a hammer. For the first time, Karen went quiet. She looked around at the people laughing, the phones recording, the clerk from the station glaring at her, and she realized she was completely cornered. There was no saving face. The receipt my wife held in her hand had destroyed every ounce of credibility she thought she had. And yet, even in that moment, Karen couldn't admit she was wrong. Instead, she muttered under her breath, "You're all going to regret ignoring me. I'm just trying to protect this community." The officer rolled his eyes, clearly done with her nonsense, and said, "Ma'am, the only person in danger here is you if you don't stop. Consider this your last warning." The tension broke again when someone in the crowd shouted, "Receipt, 1, Karen, 0, and laughter rippled through the gas station. My wife, finally letting herself smile, held the receipt up like a trophy, and the crowd actually cheered. Karen's humiliation was complete. She turned on her heel, stomped toward her car, and fumbled with her keys in her rush to escape. Before she got in, she turned back one last time, glaring at us with pure hatred, but all she managed to do was make herself look even more ridiculous. With a slam of her car door and a screech of tires, she was gone. The officers relaxed, chuckling among themselves, and one of them said, "Well, that's a first for me. Never thought a gas receipt would be courtroom-level evidence." The other nodded and added, "Honestly, if she calls us again for something like this, we're not going to be laughing. She'll be in cuffs." They handed the receipt back to my wife, who carefully tucked it into her wallet like it was the most valuable document she'd ever owned. In a way, it was, it was proof that sometimes the simplest piece of paper can shut down the loudest bully. As the crowd slowly dispersed, people kept giving us thumbs up, pats on the back, even a couple of fist bumps. One teenager called out, "I'm putting this on TikTok. You guys are going viral." My wife and I laughed, shaking our heads, but we knew he wasn't wrong. By the end of the night, half the town would know about the gas station incident, and Karen's name would be forever attached to it. On the drive home, my wife leaned back in her seat and let out a long sigh. "I can't believe she actually did that," she said. I shook my head and replied, "With Karen, I can believe anything. But at least now everyone sees who she really is." And she was right. After that day, Karen's reign of terror as HOA president would never be the same.